Welcome, my name is Kata JURACSEK and I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Russian Language and Literature at ELTA. I have a PhD in literary studies and I have been teaching cultural semiotics in the International Semiotics MA program since 2019. My research interests include 19th and 20th century Russian literature, film and literary semiotics, as well as studying the correlations of literature and visual arts. I'm also the member of the research group called Intersemiotics and Cultural Transfer, which cooperates with the University of Tartu in Estonia. The topic that I have chosen for today is the framing of and framing in cultural artifact. This is a problem that we hardly ever think about when we are consuming these artifacts, so when we are watching movies, when we are reading a book, or when we are looking at a sculpture, but which is nevertheless a phenomenon which provides immense material for semiotic research. Framing is something that is present in our everyday lives. We use cognitive frames all the time to comprehend the world around us, to assess situations, and to navigate our lives. Both our cognitive frames and the frames of artifacts designate borders, isolating certain phenomena as a meaningful unit. In order to understand what framing is from a semiotic point of view, it is worth turning to one of the founding fathers of cultural semiotics, Yuri Lotman. In the following presentation, I will reference several theoretical works of Lotman, all of which can be connected to the problem of framing. Lotman, alongside prominent researchers like Boris Uspensky, Vyacheslav Ivanov, Vladimir Toporov, and Mikhail Gasparov, in the 1960s worked in an intellectual climate which contributed to the emergence of the Tartu Moscow School of Semiotics. The Tartu Moscow School, in its thesis, examined the meaning-making processes in culture and regarded the text as the primary element or basic unit of culture. So here we are not only talking about text as something that is an oral product or written down, a message in a natural language, but the term is used in a specifically semiotic sense. Lotman defines three functions of the text. The first is to transmit messages adequately, something that we probably are all familiar with from communication models. At the same time, text also generates new meanings. This is what Lotman calls the creative function. This is the strongest in semiotic systems like literature. So when we are translating a poem or transposing a novel to film, the created text will be recognized as a new one. The third function of the text is memory, the ability to condense cultural memory to preserve the text's previous context. So, Hamlet today is not isolated, it is not just a play by Shakespeare, but it also evokes all of its previous interpretations. In a given culture, everything is a text that is a carrier of integral meaning and performs an integral function in that culture. In this sense, ceremonies, works of fine art, pieces of music, etc. can all be considered text. Culture itself is comprised of texts, which among themselves constitute a hierarchical system. What this means is that we assign value to certain texts or text types, while considering others of lesser value. This is something that of course changes over time, place and social context, as culture itself is a dynamic system and an individual can simultaneously have multiple cultural identities. For example, if we look at the larger trends of European culture, as Roman Jakobson points out, during the Renaissance, visual art, so painting and sculpture, represented the most valued branch of artistic expression, while in Romanticism it was music which had the most prestigious status. We can talk about such shifts within a given branch of art as well. For example, in the 19th century, in literature, during Romanticism, poetry was the leading form, while in realism, it was the novel that was the more valued text type. In our contemporary, globalized, but at the same time highly fragmented culture, the status of TikTok videos is on the rise, having cultural primacy for many people, especially for the younger generation. These videos absorb and substitute types of texts like the news, cookbooks, handbooks on cultivating different skills, at the same time guiding our interpretation of film, TV, and literature. When analyzing different art forms, it becomes apparent that the frame is something that is inherent in every cultural artifact. According to Lotman, the frame is the boundary separating an artistic text from the non-text. What is on the outside does not enter into the structure of a given work, it is either not a work or another work. As Werner Wolf points out, frames can be considered as transmedia phenomena, which means that they exist in all media. According to the researcher, the main function of framing is to guide and even to enable interpretation. We understand an artwork as an artwork due to the frame, and we apply rules to it that are different from everyday communication. What can be considered as frames in different art forms? In painting, the physical frame itself is what separates the canvas from the world outside of it. When we are in a museum, we usually do not see the frames themselves. In our perception, they are outside the work of art. However, it may happen that the frame can be considered as a work of art in itself. An interesting example of such a frame is the frame of Titian's painting, The Penitent Magdalene, which can be found in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg. Here we have three choices. We can concentrate on the picture. In this case, the frame will be outside. It is a material boundary. Alternatively, we can concentrate on the frame as an independent text. In this case, the canvas will become the boundary, in a sense not differing from the wall. We can also consider the two texts as one, which, due to the difference in the subject matter, one being a penitent biblical figure, the other two half-naked men with twirled mustaches, results in a comic effect. The violation of traditional frames and the establishment of new ones is a trait inherent in all arts. A recent example of challenging these boundaries is the work of English street artist Banksy. He often brings famous artworks out of the museum, recreates them, thus reframing them, taking them out of their original context. On the slide, we can see two examples. First is a mural from 2014, The Girl with a Pierced Eardrum, which references the famous painting Girl with a Pearl Earring. Here the earring is replaced with an already existing security alarm. Similarly, the graffiti that became known as The Refugees Weaving to a Luxury Yacht from 2015 references the painting Raft of the Medusa. These, as well as Banksy's other works, appear in urban settings, often incorporating what is already there, thus questioning authorship, ownership, the status of art in today's culture, as well as the boundary between life and art. In theatre, footlights are traditionally separating the work of art from the audience. However, just in the case of picture frames, we are capable of excluding certain elements of the stage from the play's artistic space. For example, in 18th century theatre, there was a tendency to install the stalls of privileged spectators right on the stage. Although these people were visible to the other members of the audience, it did not intervene with the reception of the play. A reverse example is when the frame is violated by the play itself and the action spills outside of the stage. An extreme version of this is the so-called immersive theatre, also known as interactive or participatory theatre. Here the boundaries between the art and the audience are blurred, thus expanding the conventional theatre space. The most well-known theatre company of this kind is the London-based Punch Drunk. It is a promenade theatre using immersive elements. Here the audience moves through the space freely and can create their own experience. Their performance, Sleep No More, a still of which can be seen on the slide, is a take on Macbeth with some Hitchcockian elements. The boundary is modified. The audience wears Venetian masks, which divide them from the actors. According to Felix Barrett, the founder and artistic director of the company, here the masks are our theatre seat. This is how the boundary is repositioned and minimalized. Finally, let us consider literature and film. According to Lotman, the frame of a literary work consists of two elements, the beginning and the end. Similarly, we can consider the opening and the end of a film as its frame. These are always marked, although there are certain cultural models that put more emphasis on the beginning or the end. Thus, many myths and texts of the early Middle Ages, like chronicles, highlight the origin and the founding of the nation. Similarly, book series have often a marked beginning but no definite ending, leaving room for the potential continuation. In contemporary culture, TV series, in the hopes of being renewed, often end with a cliffhanger, but when these are not continued, it often results in unanswered questions and the frustration of the audience. We face an even more difficult situation when a book series is turned into a TV series but cannot catch up with the production. We can look at George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire as an example, which was the basis of the popular HBO show Game of Thrones. In this case, there are two more books that, as of today, are still to be expected, but the TV series has already concluded. For the majority of the audience, the final season was highly disappointing, many blaming this to the lack of literary material. In many cases, the end is marked, for example in eschatological legends or in the case of happy or tragic endings. In this respect, Lotman points out how our relationship to the unhappy or happy end of a literary text is completely different to how we feel about real-life phenomena. If someone informs us of the death of a historical figure who lived 100 years ago, this will not surprise us. Whereas if the same historical figure becomes the object of artistic representation, depending on whether they die or are triumphant, it changes our impression of the work. In this respect, it might be interesting to mention two films of Quentin Tarantino, which are seemingly framed in the context of historical events, but modify how those events actually play out, thus rewriting history, playing with our expectations of endings. In *Inglourious Basterds*, the assassination of Hitler is successful, although we know well that this is not how he died. In *Once Upon a Time in Hollywood*, Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie, is saved from the Manson killers by the character of Brad Pitt. In both cases, happy or happier ending replaces the real-life events. So far, I have talked about framing, which separates the artistic text from the context. However, we can also consider framing within a given work itself. A typical structure of this is what Lotman calls a text within the text. Text within the text, according to the definition of Lotman, is a specific rhetorical construction in which the determining factor in the author's construction of the text and in the reader's reception of it is the differential codification of various parts of the text. What does this mean? How do we have to imagine this construct? To simplify it, there is a text, and within this text, another text is embedded. With the introduction of the internal boundaries, the moment of play between the real and the conventional is intensified. The embedded text is doubly encoded in accordance with identifiable artistic conventions, so we will be made aware that it was created within the text, and therefore it encourages the perception of the remaining space of the text as real. The simplest occurrence of this is when the included section is encoded in the same way as the remaining text. For example, a painting within a painting, a play within a play, a film within a film, or a novel within a novel. A classic example of a painting within a painting is Jan van Eyck's portrait of the banker Arnolfini and his wife. In the painting, the mirror hanging in the background reflects the backs of the figures, also showing the guests that they are greeting. Here, the frame of the mirror acts as a boundary, conveying another perspective. In addition, the slight deformation of the space in the mirror renders the outside text more realistic. The most famous example of a play within a play is, of course, Shakespeare's Hamlet. Here, in what is known as the mousetrap scene, Hamlet stages a play of his father's murder in order to reveal Claudius's guilt. A recent and more extreme example of a film within a film is the 2022 Everything Everywhere All at Once, which explores the concept of parallel universes. These universes are all set up according to their own rules. Another well-known example is that plays with this structure is Christopher Nolan's Inception, when framing is provided by dreams. Mikhail Bulgakov's The Master and Margarita can be considered a novel within a novel. There is a Moscow text, and within this there is a Jerusalem text. It is interesting that although the latter one, so the Jerusalem text, is more realistic, the miraculous events in the Moscow scenes are given as the primary text. What does Latmanian cultural semiotics give us? By viewing different cultural products and phenomena as texts, it is possible to enter the realm of comparative studies. Semiotics, focusing on meaning-making processes, leads us to different fields and neighboring disciplines, for example, literary studies, cultural studies, media studies, and transmedia studies. When we are analyzing these processes, we are constantly making translations. We follow how culture translates meanings and various discourses, and we reformulate these articulations in a scientific meta-language. Our International Semiotics MA program is especially unique because, amidst learning about how these processes work, we naturally feel encouraged to understand each other's culture, to translate them to our own language. To return to the problem of framing, the classes in our program provide frames for this, and we interpret different, not only verbal, cultural products. So we talk about, for example, elements of metapoetic culture, visuality, or performance practices. Semiotics is an integrative discipline, at the same time offering specific research methodologies. It can lead us to a diverse range of topics and cultural artifacts. What our students acquire is the competence of finding a key, a toolkit that enables them to better and more consciously understand culture and translate its internal processes in a systematic way. Thank you for your attention, and we are looking forward to having you in our program.